Good morning, dear parents, teachers, and fellow students. My name is Jordan Dias, and today I'm going to talk to you about whether or not climate change is a crisis. To some of you, the answer to this may seem obvious, but maybe that's not as true as you think. During the course of this speech, you might wonder why I'm passionate about this topic. And the short answer is because I've read about the propaganda of the Soviet Union, and there's no way I'm letting the cat get my tongue. Anyways, I'm going to start like any great philosopher would by defining the terms I use. So, when I talk about climate change, I'm referring to the long term shifts in temperature and weather patterns. This is defined by the UN. And when I'm talking about a crisis, I'm talking about a time of intense difficulty or danger. This is by the Oxford Dictionary. So, now if I have to frame the question again more precisely, using these definitions, I would say, do the changes in temperature and weather patterns put us in immediate danger? And just for us to get a scope of how bad we're supposed to believe this issue is, let me read you a quote by Greta Thunberg. I don't want you to be hopeful. I want you to panic. I want you to feel the fear I feel every day. Okay, so moving on from this, one of the presumptions made by the first question is that there are long term shifts in temperature and weather patterns. Now, I don't disagree with that, but I don't have enough evidence to believe that it is as intense as you're supposed to believe it is. So it's true that the temperature change over the last hundreds of years has gone up, and the carbon dioxide percentage in the atmosphere has also increased. But by how much? So the temperature change over the last 170 years has been 1 degree Celsius, which is 0.06 degrees Celsius per decade. And the carbon dioxide percentage over the last 170 years has gone from 0.028% to 0.04%. And according to the University of North Carolina, 33% of all the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is released by human activity. Now, what I'm trying to point out here is that these numbers are very small. It's not something that should be scaring us as much as it is. And I'll come back to that point later in the speech. Another thing is that if this if the carbon dioxide percentage drops by around 35%, virtually all of the plants die. I got this from an article on hydroponics, and it is also supported by other sources. Another thing I wanted to touch on is the insistence that the number of trees is falling. So in the 1920s, there were about 750 billion trees, and in 2021, we calculated around 3.04 trillion trees. This is a massive improvement. And during the course of this experiment, a tree was defined as a woody plant that is at least chest height with a width of at least 10 centimeters. Now we can move to the next part of this question, which is, do these changes in weather patterns put us in immediate danger? And so it's true that the intensity of climate related disasters has gone up. It's also true that the number of deaths has gone down. So in the 1920s, about 500,000 people died every year because of climate related disasters. But in 2021, it was just 7,000 people. This is a 99% decrease. And this is from an article on the New York Post. One of the effects of climate change that is outlined by the UN is poverty. In their words, climate change increases the factors that put and keep up people in poverty. So, something interesting about this is that the number of people in poverty is actually going down. So, there's more than a billion fewer people who live in poverty today than they did in the 1990s. This is because 47 million people are lifted out of poverty. That's supposed to be every day, every year. Sorry. This is according to the University of Oxford. This 47 million people a year is also is equal to 130,000 people being lifted out of poverty every single day. So everything that we have covered so far, if I have to draw a conclusion from that, I'd say that climate change might not be as drastic as it is portrayed, and the danger in which it puts us seems to be reducing. But there's one more thing I want to point out. So, as humans, we mitigate and adapt to changes in our environment. We don't stand idle while the world around us crumbles and do nothing about it. So, if we exaggerate the effects of climate change, we also end up exaggerating the actions we take to compensate for that. And we have already seen the consequences of this materializing. So, in the winter of 2022 in Europe, there was a policy put out to increase the use of renewable energy. This is by the International Energy Agency and the World Economic Forum. So, to give the devil his due, this did increase the usage of renewable energy, and it pulled it ahead of the usage of fossil fuels for the first time. But there was a downside to this, which was that significantly more than 3,000 people lost their life. This is according to The Guardian. So, does climate change exist? Probably. Is it a crisis? It doesn't seem so. These 3,000 people that lost their life were older people living on the edge already, unable to pay their energy bills and freezing to death. And this, we are going to keep seeing more of this if we continue being alarmists. Thank you.